I'm turning the camera on because I want to do an experiment. I was just in the process of re-gluing this very primitive toy car. My son and I built it from a kit. And I got to thinking, maybe I can use one of these little motors to make music. Obviously, on their own, the motors do make a sound, but that's not necessarily the sound I'm interested in. To do the experiment I'm thinking of, we're going to use a guitar pickup. These kinds of magnetic pickups were invented in the early 1930s, paving the way for the electric guitar. And yes, this is what the first electric guitar looked like. Here's the patent diagram for that same instrument. You can see the pickups right here. So anyway, these pickups are kind of like microphones, but instead of picking up vibrations from air molecules, they use a magnetic field to pick up the vibration of metal objects, in this case guitar strings. Which got me thinking, couldn't we just wave any old piece of metal in front of them and also have it produce a sound? Obviously, it's very easy to get percussive sounds out of them. All you have to do is tap them or scrape them with something metal, like a butter knife. But what I'm really looking to do is to play a musical note. So the basic requirement for something to produce a pitch is it has to oscillate or move back and forth at a constant rate. Like this, but faster. So let's see if we can get the motor to do that for us. First, I'm going to hook up some batteries to this motor. Next, I'm going to hot glue a little magnet to this wheel, which will get attached to the motor. By the way, all of these parts except for the magnet are coming from this kit. Okay, I've hooked the output from the pickup up to my computer, and I just hit record. Now, all I'm going to do is turn the motor on and bring the spinning magnet within range. Wow, that sounds really terrible. Right out of the gate, I'm almost ready to call this experiment a failure. At the same time, if I look at the oscilloscope on my computer, that looks like a viable waveform. I think the pitch is just too low for me to really hear it. The lowest frequency that humans can hear is roughly 20 cycles per second, and this is 28, so it's almost out of the range of human hearing. I'm going to try to change the frequency by doubling the speed. Okay, let's double it again. And again. Okay, so that's an actual waveform. It actually sounds kind of cool. I'm going to export this sound out of Reaper, and then I'm going to bring it into Ableton Live. I'm going to use Live's Simpler plugin to try to turn this into a little instrument. Oh, that's really cool. Let's add some reverb. Oh, I like this. Part of what I like about it is that the timbre and pitch aren't 100% consistent. That's probably because I was holding it in my hands and moving it slightly as I recorded. If you look at the oscilloscope, you can actually see the waveform changing as I move my hand. This is really cool. I'm going to send it to my friend Cameron, aka Venus Theory, and see what he thinks. The fact that I was almost ready to give up until I increased the speed of the signal, it's kind of chastening. As a samplist, I'm always listening in my everyday life for musically useful sounds. I've sampled just about every bowl, every cup in my kitchen, and I listen with my ears to figure out whether or not a sound has potential. But that didn't really work this time. Here, I was faced with a sound that I could barely hear until I sped it up. And I wonder how many other great sounds I've missed just because I couldn't hear them, because they were out of the range of human hearing. Okay, let's continue our experiments. Okay, so we've captured the sound of a round magnet spinning near the pickup. Let's try a more exotic shape. I'm just going to take some wire here and I'm going to bend it into a random shape. This is what I ended up with. Now I'm going to glue that shape to one of these centerpieces so that we can attach it to the motor. I've repeated the process 2 more times so that we have a few shapes to try out. This time around, instead of holding the motor with my hand, let's use a lab stand. I'm going to attach the motor to the grabber on the bottom. Let's try to attach one of our shapes. So now that we've got this working, let's add another arm to our lab stand and attach the pickup. Okay, let's give this thing a spin. Okay, we've got ourselves a nice waveform. Let's go into Ableton and see how that sounds as an instrument. So it definitely sounds pretty different than just the magnet on its own. My guess is that each piece of metal we put on this thing is going to produce a completely different waveform. Okay, moving on. Let's try this sort of flower-shaped thing. Okay, once again, we're going to want to speed this up. Wow, it's super different sounding. Okay, let's hear that as an instrument. It's pretty cool. So in theory, we'd be able to get an infinite number of different complex waveforms just by attaching different oddly shaped pieces of metal to the motor. It's funny, there are many digital synthesizers that allow you to draw a waveform on the screen. Here, thanks to guitar pickups, we found an analog way of doing something very similar. Of course, this use of a pickup is pretty different from the way a guitar might use it. On an electric guitar, the string moves back and forth at a nearly constant rate, but our setup here is quite a bit more complex. Let's take the shape that's on the screen right now. Let's imagine that the pickup is here. Each time that shape spins, each of these metal wires is going to travel across the magnetic fields of the pickup, and in so doing, it's going to generate a complex waveform that's really hard to predict. All in all, if you're a tinkerer or a sound designer, I would highly recommend this experiment. It's a useful reminder that guitar pickups can be used to capture all sorts of sounds other than guitar strings. I should mention that while good pickups can be quite expensive, cheap ones like the kind I'm using in this video can be had for about $10 on AliExpress. And that's good because waving a magnet in front of a pickup is actually a great way to ruin it, so do be careful if you try to replicate this. So remember when I said I sent all my sounds to Venus Theory? Well, he's been hard at work. He's taken those warm, analog waves I sent him and done some serious sound design on them. Pushing them to places I honestly never thought they would go. The sounds he's made are really beautiful. I especially like taking those sounds and combining them with the raw waveforms that I generated from my experiment. Which is why we've put the whole thing together as one package, where you can do just that. All told, there are 30 presets, which should be useful in all sorts of electronic music, from IDM to film scores to synthwave. It's really a very versatile set of sounds. The library can be purchased on the Decent Samples site, and for the next 2 weeks, it's just $20. After that, it goes up to $30. Okay, I think that's it. If you enjoyed this video, it'd be great if you could subscribe. I've got a bunch of different videos on the way. See you soon.